Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the HawgBeat Half Hour presented by our great friends at Bet Saracen. I'm Kyle Sutherland alongside Daniel Fair. Daniel, it is officially like full-on football. So it's been officially football season for a little bit now. But this week NFL starts. We've got a Razorback game under our belt. Really we got 1 full week of college football, but 2 weeks of somewhat college football, I guess you could say, if you count or counting week 0. So we are right on into it, and now we get the game that we found out was going to happen about 4 years ago. And to many, I'm sure, can't believe that it is happening. Personally, I had said for years that Arkansas State was not going to happen until Frank Boreals passed. And this was before I was in media, when I was just really talking to people, just having small talks of whether this game should happen or not. But Arkansas took care of business against Alabama A&M, had a few things that they had, well, maybe more than a few things that they have to work on, and we'll talk about that here in just a second before we get into state. But you were at the Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium on Saturday and got a chance to see it. So what was your just overall take from it once the defense got going and seeing what the offense did?
Yeah, it was a great day. The weather, I don't think it got above 83 degrees. It was a little toasty as I was walking up the hill to get into the stadium, but fantastic day for football. Like we mentioned, the defense started out not so hot, but thankfully the offense was kind of firing on all cylinders. Taylor Green looked really, really good. Obviously, opponent competition level aside, like he looked a lot more poised. He looked accurate. He made some throws in that game that I don't think that he would have made last year. And so you definitely see the growth from QB1. They have got to fix their slow starts on defense because, and I put this on the board a couple of days ago, but those slow starts and they started in those scrimmages in fall camp. You know, they talked about it pretty at length in the first scrimmage, and then in the second scrimmage, like the second team offense scored on the first team defense on the first drive. And then you get into Saturday's game, and it was just like a chain link fence in a hurricane. Like Cornelius Brown had absolutely no trouble driving that team down the field and scoring on that first drive. And they clamped down as the game went on. Obviously, the 7 points they scored, that was all they scored. So, some positives there. But with a slow start like that, you can manage that against Alabama A&M. You can manage it to an extent against Arkansas State, possibly Memphis. But once you get into the teeth of the SEC schedule, like that's just it's not something that can happen. And so they've definitely got to get that worked on. I liked the special teams play. I thought, Scott Starzik nailing a 53-yard field goal as his first collegiate field goal ever. That was impressive to me. I thought the punting game was good. We had that weird squib onside kick.
Devin Bell was on. So we're recording on a Monday here. Devin Bell was on the Pat Mac. Well, he wasn't on the Pat Mac, but that play made the Pat Mac. Yeah. Of course, Pat is a former punter and loves to highlight the specialist. But yeah, that made the Pat McAfee show on Monday.
Yeah, it was such a weird play. Like I was looking down at my computer when it happened because of my thought. I was like, okay, they're going to kick this off. It's going to be a touchback. They're going to kneel it out. We're going to the half. I was like getting my halftime stuff kind of prepped. And then I looked up and there's Devin Bale just running down the sideline. I was like, what is going on? Very obscure play. But special teams overall, I liked what I saw out of them. It's really just the defense that I've still got questions on at this point in the season.
Yeah, and I know that the biggest conversation amongst Razorback fans has been the defensive line. And you and we talked, even dating back to SEC media days and some of the conversations that we've had in our group chats. And I think that Quincy Rhodes is going to have nobody had breakout stats. Like Cam Ball had 1 tackle for loss, but it was a key tackle for loss for -4 yards. And Quincy Rhodes had the first sack of the season for the Razorbacks. And I think that he's going to have a chance to be a really special player if he just continues to develop like we think he will. But I still that is the biggest question. And look, Xavier, and I know this has been a big topic of conversation. You go and look on our site, and there's a story about we have all the PFF grades for the week, and he graded, I will go ahead and say this, it's a premium story, of course, but he graded the lowest. And that was an alarming game that he played, and that has been a topic of conversation on the boards. And obviously he's been dealing with that hamstring injury, and that's what I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on that. Look, it's the first game. He had a bad game, and you certainly can't have another one of those because your linebackers were supposed to be the core, and they still can be, but the strength of the defense. And there were way too many open. I know that there was some miscommunication. They talked about that, but there were a lot of open plays, even at that time when they started to come. All in all, what was it? They gave up the touchdown and then didn't surrender another point for the rest of the game. So what was it? They scored 41 unanswered points. I guess it was something like that. So all in all, they did their job. But I think that really what you take out of this game is, look, you only get 12 guaranteed opportunities. Well, I say guaranteed. COVID taught us nothing's guaranteed. But each season you get in FBS level, you get 12 games that are put on your schedule. So every single win, regardless of who it's against, that's very precious. So I think that you can still be very excited that you started 1-0. You're going into this historic game. Both teams 1-0. But then again, the defense is there, and there's plenty of things they have to work on offensively too. But obviously that was humming a little bit better. But I just think I'm with you, and like everybody else, you really just cannot afford a slow start. And we'll get in, and as soon as I'll get your feedback on that. But as soon as we finish this part of the show up, we go into an offense that has essentially a triplet group as a wide receiver, running back, and quarterback that are going to give you a lot of problems potentially.
Yeah, with the defensive line, one thing that really surprised me was Charlie Collins getting the start over Justice Boone. And it's not because I don't think Charlie Collins is a good player. I think he's solid. But they talked about Justice Boone all through fall camp like he was, this stud defensive end. And then it felt like we hardly saw him on the field. I mean, he played, obviously, but he didn't do nearly what I thought he was going to do. And that was a little confusing and slightly concerning for me. Campbell, I think he was the highest graded starter on the defensive line when it came to the Pro Football Focus grades. That was a really key tackle for loss. But and like you mentioned, like Quincy Rhodes is going to be really solid. But one of the guys that kind of came out of nowhere for me was Philip Lee. He had the first tackle for loss of the game. I really like what he can do as a kind of a gadget defensive end a little bit. Like he's not the kind of guy that's going to line up every single snap when SEC play starts, but there's a lot of good stuff that I think he's going to be able to do. And then, on the interior, Danny Saili and Ian Gaffrar, I thought both had decent games. You got to get more pressure on the quarterback though, because too many times Cornelius Brown had way too much time in the pocket. And, obviously they held him to 7 points. For what it's worth, Alabama A&M did have like a 40-yard gain on a miscommunication a couple of drives later that probably would have landed at least 3 points if it hadn't have been called back for a penalty. So a lot of stuff they got to get cleaned up on the defensive line. And then obviously you want your linebackers to do a little bit more. Like we mentioned, Sori was the lowest graded guy, and obviously he had that hamstring going in, but the way that they made it sound was that he was fine. If he was anything less than fine at this point, why not sit him? It's Alabama A&M. Give Bradshaw the start, or so. It's one of those things where like you got to get more production from a team captain and a redshirt senior in that linebacker group. One guy that stuck out to me though was Shakur Smalls. He Maine transfer. Nobody really knew anything about him because he came after spring practice ended, but he's just one of those guys that went in. He had that strip sack fumble that he recovered there in the second half. Very physical guy, not afraid to go out there and pop somebody. I was really impressed with him as well.
Now we'll go in and go ahead and flip the script to this week. But before we do, let's tell you about our friends over at Rowback. They have released so many items with their new licensed game day collection, from everyday shorts, and their everyday shorts on their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They are both super comfortable, have an elastic waistband, and great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for a day on the move. Use the code HAW20 on HawgBeat.com. That's RHOBACK.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers. So your first order, 20% off That is 20% off for all performance polos, shorts, and more with code HAW20 at rhoback.com, RHOBACK. So looking at the Arkansas State Red Wolves, that triplet group that I just talked about, Jalen Rayner, which, Jalen Rayner a couple of years ago, I had heard, I don't know if this was actually ever officially reported or even true, but I had heard that after his freshman year, Alabama had been giving him some calls. I mean, there were some SEC schools that were after him. Again, I never had that confirmed. I wasn't covering college at that time, so you might know a little bit more than I do, but also Jaquez Cross, know him very well, covered him at Fordyce very extensively. Then, of course, he went to Purdue for a semester, for a season, and then ended up in Jonesboro. And then, of course, Corey Rucker, who does not matter, not just one of the best in the Sun Belt, one of the best in the entire country. You're talking about Group of Five, Power Four, whichever you want to look at. One of the better receivers in the entire country. And, he only had 2 catches against, which actually, let's go ahead and pull these. I got these stats loaded if I can. So Corey Rucker against SEMO only had 2 catches the entire game, but he was pretty covered up. Of course, it was two for those over 50 yards. One of those was for exactly 50 yards. So, that opened up the door. You look at I almost said KJ Jefferson, KJ Jackson. He came in relief of Taylor, so it was really good to get him some reps against Alabama A&M for Arkansas. But there were, was it 9 or 10 different? I don't have that right in front of me. Was it 9 or 10 different receivers for Arkansas that caught a pass?
I believe it was 10.
It was 10. Okay, so I think it was 10. Or actually, I lied. I do have that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it was 10. And then you see the way that they were able to disperse the ball, obviously, for Arkansas State. So a very kind of similar game in that regard. There was quite a few that ran the foot, which you would expect in a first game. Arkansas had quite a few that ran the ball, and Arkansas State did as well. Arkansas State obviously just played their first-string quarterback. But really for them was when it got going was in the second quarter there. You see they put up a 21 spot, and really for the most part, Daniel had control throughout the second and third quarters. They did really well at the beginning with about 9. I think it was the first 3 drives or it was 3 drives from the end of the third quarter to the beginning of the fourth that Arkansas State had 4 consecutive 3-and-outs, or at least had 4 consecutive stops. I know that much. So the defense did some really good things there. But all in all, when you just talk about getting the ball around to different playmakers, because look, obviously Rucker is going to have the majority of the focus. That's obvious, and as well he should. Chauncey Cobb, who was their leading receiver, you see there with 5 catches for 85 yards, had an insane catch that I don't believe somehow did not make the SportsCenter top 10, where he basically picked it up with his feet before it hit the ground and was able to catch that. But you look at Jaquez Cross there, 8 carries for 36 yards. Not his best game, not his worst, but you would expect that he's probably going to be a little bit more on, especially playing against, a home state team like Arkansas. But Arkansas, as we know, has struggled at many different times and under many, many different coaches against dual threat quarterbacks. And Jalen Rayner, he can hurt you in so many different ways. And I think that's probably one of the bigger concerns going into Saturday.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed about Rayner is he's very difficult to bring down, even in the pocket. Like he's pretty slippery. They had SEMO had several opportunities to bring him down for a sack, and he didn't get sacked a single time in that game. Talk about dual threat quarterbacks. I mean, the nightmare that always comes back to mind when I think of a dual threat quarterback is Lynn Bowden at Kentucky, who's the wide receiver turned quarterback for like 2 weeks or however long it was, that just torched Arkansas back in Chad Morris's final year. Sorry to bring him up, but dual threat quarterbacks have been kind of the Achilles heel for Arkansas for the last 5 to 10 years, and also playing in Little Rock. I mean, I put it out the other day, like they haven't beaten an FBS opponent there in like 10 years, and the last few years they've played the cupcake FCS teams, or it's the average score I believe was like 56-5 or something like that. But Little Rock has not been a kind place for Arkansas, and it's one of those things that this is kind of a can't lose game if you're Arkansas, because you've been talking for 90 years, however long it's been. We're the big brother. We're the premier program in the state, and now you have to prove it. And if you don't prove it, I don't think you can live that down. And so, this is the the optics of this game, the pressure is very one-sided. There's a lot of pressure on Arkansas. There's not as much pressure on Arkansas State. And so, how they handle that pressure, I'm interested to see. Obviously, you want the offense to get going as quickly as possible, but you want the defense to be able to live up to some of the hype. And so I'm very intrigued by this matchup. I think it's a lot harder than what you would think, as far as how the game's going to probably play out. But yeah, this is absolutely a can't lose game in my opinion.
And obviously that has been one of the biggest and we try not to go too deep into the whole of like, Sam Pittman, will this happen or will this not happen if they do indeed lose to Arkansas State? And that's something that we'll cross once if it is to happen. But I do know this. If Arkansas is to lose this game, it's going to be a very busy Sunday for us and the other media one way or another. That's when the conversations, I will leave it at that at least, that the conversations what I'm referring to will really, I don't think it's going to be one of those situations to where like he gets left in Little Rock or anything like I know that there's some that are talking about that, but that's when the conversations, we'll just say, since this game is here, hypothetically speaking, that's when the conversations will really begin to ramp up.
Yep. That was why it would be in their best interest to just go ahead, take care of business, and walk out of Little Rock with the win.
Yeah, easily. That's perfectly put. So how do you see this? Do you see maybe the defense really learn? Look, they talked about it. And look, if you go back and look at the film, you can definitely see some miscommunication, some first game type stuff. Do you see the defense maybe like, okay, we realize some of the stuff that we've done? Do you see it being one of those where the defense starts a little bit quicker, or will this just be an offensive shootout between two really solid dual threat quarterbacks?
I don't know. I don't see it being a shootout. I don't think that'll happen. I think the defense after that first quarter, they locked up. It's one of those things where you just don't want to have that kind of first quarter happen again. I could very well see this turning into a shootout if the defense doesn't have their head on straight and they end up going, a quarter and a half, one half, the first half with, letting these missed assignments and that sort of thing plague them. But I think that probably lit a fire underneath the defense last week's performance, and so I don't see it as the kind of thing that happens twice in a row. So I like to think that the defense will be able to start off strong, and hold Arkansas State down for a while, just to let the offense cook for a little bit, get out to a quick early lead. I don't think Arkansas State's not just going to lay down and quit, right? Like they believe this is their state as much as Arkansas believes it's theirs. And so, they're not just going to lay down and quit, but I think if Arkansas can jump out to an early lead, whether that be 14-3 or 10-0 or something like that, I think it's one that Arkansas can kind of go under cruise control a little bit for. I think Arkansas has the better athletes than Arkansas State does. It's just a matter of how well you use them and how mentally prepared they are.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Arkansas is the more talented team in this. And I think for me, we talked a lot about deep because I think that really there's not a whole lot that you could really talk about the offense other than they are going to have to get the run game going. It seemed like it took some time to get Mike Wash going. We need more from Braylon Russell, 11 carries, 41 yards. I mean, you're going to need more from him. Obviously, you'd like to get – Coach Colby Smith, the running backs coach, he had talked about when he had his media time back during fall camp that he likes to run 3 running backs. And I guess this is his third year as running backs coach. And then last year, of course, Braylon, or is it second year? Okay, so yeah, I'm a little behind there. But Braylon Russell, of course, dealt with the injury a little bit back there towards the end. Of course, there was injuries and all kinds of different things, towards the end. I know Rodney Hill dealt with the concussion for 3 games, and there was just it was kind of just that Jaquindon was dealing with injury. So I mean, really, you were pretty banged up for the most part. But I feel like if they could, I know that they had talked about they like to have 3, but I feel like if you can get Braylon going, if he has a down game, Rodney maybe comes in and really kind of shows what he can do fully healthy. But it can't just be on Mike, especially when you're a team that relies on just about every offense relies on multiple backs now in today's age, the way that so many teams play. You're not going to have a ton of those anymore. They're going to have 25 and 30 carries every single game. But if it's not Braylon Russell, it has to be Rodney. If it's not Mike Wash, then it has to be Braylon Russell. You've got to see more out of the running backs, I think, this week, and hopefully this is the week that they prove that.
Yeah, I agree. They definitely need to get more out of him. I was kind of surprised how very little we saw of Mike Washington through the middle of the game. He did miss a pass protection that ended up leading to a sack. So you want to get that fixed. Obviously, that's probably more the reason as to why he didn't see as many carries. But I mean, they still rushed for 226 yards. They had 194 net total yards. You factor in sacks and all that stuff. Not a terrible performance, but I think that you would have liked to see more. The one thing I'll say is this, and this is just kind of the vibe that I got from the whole game, is they didn't go into it saying, we're going to go in and we're going to pound you in the run game, and we couldn't do that, so we started throwing. To me, this last game felt like we're going to throw the ball, we're going to get our wide receivers going, and we're going to use the run game to complement that. There were some people that I saw on the internet kind of comparing this to that 2023 Western Carolina game. But I don't see it the same way. In that Western Carolina game, it was like, oh, shoot, we can't run the ball. We better start to out-athlete them in the pass game. This one, it felt like the MO going in was we're going to throw the ball, and we're going to use the run game kind of to complement that. Mike Washington is fast, though. He's got some real speed to kind of get that edge and make some stuff happen in open space. But you're right. I mean, you still want to see more out of him. I think he had, I believe it was in the 50s rushing yards wise, but he also had, a pretty big receiving touchdown from KJ Jackson as well. Like, you can see the ability there. I just don't think that they showcased it necessarily as much as fans probably wanted to see.
Well, 4:00 kickoff at War Memorial Stadium. You can stream it on ESPN Plus, SEC Network Plus. Of course, we will have wall-to-wall breakout coverage on HawgBeat.com. You can check out all of our content that we've already done up to this point. We've already got some A-State content, both on our YouTube. Well, you can find it on the website too, but go to the YouTube channel. You can see both the Butch Jones preview as well as Sam Pittman and all the other content that we do have right now. You see it on the bottom of the screen there if you're watching. That you can subscribe right now for $1 for your first week. That includes a year of The Athletic for new members, of course, On3 and Rivals as well. So we do have another segment coming up right after this. We're going to bring on Zach Hall, who is just as good as they come when it comes to weather, admittedly. And I know that it's very convenient for me to say this now, but that's who I usually follow. I love to follow the Facebook Live meteorologists because it's cool to watch the ones that you grew up on the news and everything, but you can't ask questions to them. You can ask questions, and that's one thing that Zach's always been really good about. So looking forward to hearing and watching his weather report, getting a little bit of insight on this game from him as well. So we'll see what he thinks about it. So up next, we will have Zach Hall to wrap the show up with a weather report for this weekend from Little Rock. We will see you in the next segment.
All right. Welcome into the next segment of the HawgBeat half hour. I am Daniel Fair as we're coming in from our ball talk, but to start a new segment today, we're calling it the Tailgate Forecast. That's the working name for right now. We haven't fully decided on it, but when Kyle and I were kicking around ideas on what to do to make the podcast just a little bit different, one of the things that I thought about was the weather. If you guys are anything like me, the very first thing you think of when you're making plans is, well, what's the weather going to be like? And obviously we know, I imagine, I don't want to be presumptuous, I imagine the people that are listening to this podcast are Arkansas fans. And Arkansas fans like to tailgate. They like to hang out and fire up the grill before the game starts and maybe after the game starts. And so I thought, what better way to provide some extra value to our listeners than by bringing in who I believe to be, and I'm not just saying this because he's sitting on a podcast with me, the best weather streamer in the state of Arkansas. And so I've brought in my buddy Zach. Zach and I have kind of followed each other for the last 5 years or so. And just to give us a quick little update on what the forecast is going to be, kind of across the state. We'll kind of zero in on Little Rock, obviously, that's where the game this week will be played. But Zach, why don't you tell the people just a little bit about who you are, and then you can just jump right in with what we can expect weather-wise this weekend.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys having me on and doing this. This is the good stuff. I really like talking about sports. I'm a huge Razorback fan, so I appreciate that. For those of you who have literally no idea who I am, my name is Zachary Hall. I'm a weather forecaster here in the state of Arkansas. I cover all 75 counties every single day on social media, and I've done so for quite a while now. I used to be a professional storm chaser, traveled the country, did that. I've kind of retired out of that now, and big boy job. I have kiddos, so I had to kind of morph out of that and into more of a forecaster role, and I've been doing that now for quite a while, and I really, really enjoy it. I'm social media driven, so all of my content is social media focused, live streaming during severe weather. But Facebook's my big one. I use YouTube quite a bit. Of course, Twitter. Everybody uses Twitter for sports and weather these days, and I also use TikTok as well. So any major social media platform, there's a good chance you'll find me on there talking about something Arkansas weather related.
Awesome. Yeah. So as far as this weekend, I know we're recording this and it's Tuesday night. Obviously, weather is subject to change. Nobody knows that more than you and people who are very into the weather. But as far as this weekend, what can fans expect to see coming kind of around the Little Rock area, Central Arkansas area this weekend?
Well, I just checked the latest data before I hopped on with you here, and it looks like we're going to be on a little bit of a warming trend this week, a little bit warmer than what we've dealt with lately through at least Friday. Friday actually looks hot. Some highs up in the 90s on Friday, but things are going to come crashing down Friday evening into Saturday. We have a pretty strong cold front that's going to pass through the region right in time for Saturday, which I think will be perfect for the game as far as the temperatures go. I think the temperatures on Saturday, especially in Central Arkansas, the Little Rock area, should be in the mid-70s. I think it's right now, unless something dramatically changes, which I guess it could. If that front slows down a little bit, it's possible that Little Rock, Central Arkansas might lag behind a little bit. But I think for right now, and of course, like you said earlier, weather is subject to change, and we'll have updates, of course. But I think right now it's fair to say that the high should be in the mid to maybe even the upper 70s on Saturday with some passing clouds. There is a chance that we could deal with this passing system, some showers and storms on Saturday afternoon as well. It does not look at this time to be a washout, but when you have this sort of thing, a stronger front passing through, it's possible that we could have some lingering showers or thunderstorms. Maybe, it's best to call it spotty or maybe even scattered activity. I wouldn't certainly cancel tailgating plans, but maybe if you're going through your planning for Saturday, if you plan on heading to War Memorial for the game, you might just bring some rain gear just in case, but hopefully you don't need to use it.
Awesome. And then for those who are, maybe just across the state that aren't able to make it down to War Memorial Stadium, just a quick generic, obviously you can't go into every single county, all 75 of them, but kind of across the state, what can they expect?
I think Saturday looks pretty pleasant as far as temperature goes. I think we'll have mostly 70s across a large part of the state, mid to upper 70s. If you live in the southern 2 or 3 rows of counties in South Arkansas, that front might still be working through, so temperatures might be more in the 80s rather than the 70s. But I think unless something dramatic changes with this front timing, which could happen, but for right now, all the information that I have, it looks like most of the state will be in the 70s with some moderate cloud cover. We'll have some passing clouds associated with that system. And of course, I think the whole state, it's fair to say that a large majority of the state will have at least some low chances for rain or storms on Saturday afternoon if you have plans to watch the game or if you're going to be outdoors grilling or whatever you might be doing. So I feel like it sounds generic, but it seems like a pretty broad brush forecast for Saturday across a large part of the state.
Awesome. And you mentioned, obviously, you're a big Razorback fan. Pretty massive game this weekend. First one between Arkansas and Arkansas State. How do you feel about that game?
So first and foremost, I'm not from Northeast Arkansas. I live in Western Arkansas near Fort Smith. So I didn't grow up with Arkansas State. I respect their program, and I don't root against them or anything like that. But yeah, I'm a big Razorback fan. I live and die by the Hogs sometimes, and so I will be rooting for the Razorbacks. I think the Hogs will take care of this one. I do wonder a little bit about the defense. I know that everybody was kind of scratching their head with that first series against Alabama A&M, but they settled in. I think as the game goes on, I think it'll be closer than some people think. I don't expect them to, swat Arkansas State out of the stadium. But I do think the Hogs end up winning by a couple of scores at a minimum by the time the final bell sounds. But hopefully the Hogs, I think I predicted on Facebook the other day, I think it's like 42-24 or something like that. A couple score difference there towards the end of the game. The Hogs will start pulling away and wearing them out. I hope. We'll see. So
that is the hope. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking some time to talk to us today. Tell the people what's your handles on Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff. Where can they find you?
Well, so on Facebook, that's my number one. I always try to recommend people to Facebook. Just type in Zachary Hall, Arkansas Storm Tracker. You'll find me there. If you don't use Facebook, no big deal. If you use TikTok, you can type Zachary Hall, Arkansas Storm Tracker. You'll find me there. And then Twitter is kind of the same thing. My handle on Twitter is @WXZachary. Same on Instagram. And then on YouTube, if you type in Zachary Hall, Arkansas Storm Tracker, you'll find me there as well. So if you type in Zachary Hall, I hope most platforms will lead you my way. But if they don't, the Arkansas Storm Tracker tagline should get you there.
Okay, awesome. Well, appreciate you taking some time to talk to us. Check Zach Hall out on Zachary Hall or Zach. Can I call you Zach?
I don't care. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
No, I don't care.
Check out Zachary Hall on those social media platforms. I know personally, whenever severe weather hits kind of close to home for me, whether that's Northwest Arkansas or wherever, the very first place that I go to is I go check out Zach Hall on any social media platform because. He'll get you kind of set up with what to expect and that sort of stuff. And even a little bit of Kansas. I've got a lot of family out in the Kansas area.
Yeah.
And
Thanks,
anytime
dude.
back when he was doing some storm chasing, I was like, I saw him in Kansas one day. I was like, this is not going to be good. And anytime
Kansas,
you see a
my
storm
state.
chaser, yeah, Kansas is fun.
Seen a lot of
Anyways,
tornadoes up there.
Yep. I covered the Andover one back in 22. It was, I believe, Hoisington is where you were when that hit.
I was north near Harrington.
Harrington, that's right.
I had several tornadoes. I was in the Andover, Wichita area earlier that day, but I moved north. I like those supercells better. Man, did I pay for that forecast because I missed a big one. So it happens sometimes.
Yeah, that one was crazy. But anyways, we can talk about Kansas tornadoes later. But appreciate you taking some time with us, Zach, and we'll see you next week and hopefully see you on Saturday.
Yep. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, awesome.